What's up all? It's John with EDMProd, and today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know to make lo-fi hip hop. So lo-fi hip hop is typically defined by really chill, laid-back beats, sort of dusty, down-sampled drums. Everything feels like it's nostalgic, it's old, it's got a little bit of grit. To start with, let's set our project to a nice, slow tempo. Like I said, lo-fi hip hop is very chill. Usually anything between 60 to 90 BPM will work pretty well. I'll set my project to 85 BPM. And usually what I do first when I'm making this genre is I'll go and look for a sample that I find inspiring. I usually find that a lot of guitar or piano samples work well, so let's just take a look at the library and see what I can find. I found this pretty nice clip in one of the Ableton packs here called Mood Reel. It's called Nostalgic Chords. Pretty vibey. It kind of gives me a good place to start off. So I'll just loop that a little bit. But I actually think I want to get rid of the lower notes on this one, just because I want to write my own chords. I can hear a lot of low end grit, so I'll throw an EQ8 and just cut some of that out. Lo-fi often has a very down-sampled, sort of dark feel to it as well, so I might actually take a little of the high end off and just do a really pretty aggressive band pass on this to make it feel kind of like it's like a decayed tape or something. Yeah, that's really nice. So the next thing I want to do here is I want to write some chords. For this, I'm just going to grab the standard grand piano. We'll start with this. I usually like to start with the piano and just play around with that, and then I might try a few other sounds out. I want to stick with the D minor we've established through this clip that I added in. So if you're on Live 12, you're going to be able to set the entire project to the key of D minor with this little section right up here. Now I can just highlight the scale and I can see all the notes that are in D minor. And actually as I'm playing around with this, I kind of feel like I actually want the tempo a little lower. I do this a lot where I'll start a song with a certain tempo and then shift it around. Let's just try it at 70 BPM instead. Much slower, because I'm actually hearing more of a dotted kind of rhythm with this. So I can highlight these notes and just drag the little handle that appears so that this is now a dotted quarter note rhythm. Against the metronome, it sounds like this. Yeah, that's pretty nice. I'll go ahead and adjust my chords down here. And we'll go ahead and stick with that as our kind of main rhythmic motif for now. This is a pretty nice feelsy progression I've got going on here. Let's take a listen to it. I'm liking how that sounds right now, but it's really robotic, and one of the important things when you're making this genre is that everything sounds as though it's played in and has a very human feel to it. So I'm going to shift a bunch of these notes around just based on my own personal taste. I'm also probably going to make a lot of use of this feature over here, the humanize feature, where you can actually set this to, I don't know, we'll just start at 30-ish% and hit humanize. And you can see what it's doing is it's shifting the notes around a little bit. If we zoom in, we get a better idea of what's happening. It's moving some notes forward and some notes back. I can make this pretty aggressive by turning it up quite high. But I want to go even further with this. It's not really moving it enough for me. So I'm just going to start scooting some notes around so it's noticeably messy. Sometimes what I like to do when I'm trying to make something sound more human is just press Command 4 and turn the grid off entirely. So I've gone in here, I've made a lot of changes, I've added a few notes, just tried to make it all a little bit more offbeat, off the grid. Yeah, I think that'll be nice. Lovely, lovely. That's all sounding really good. Doesn't really sound that lo-fi though at this point. We can probably stick with a piano sound here, but what I want to do now is add some of that really stylistic lo-fi hip hop processing to it. That kind of like tape warble, scratchiness, the like really, really kind of pleasing, dirty effects that you typically associate with this genre. There's a few different ways to do this in Ableton, but I first just want to talk about one really cool little Max for Live device that I use for this called Crap Cassette. As soon as I add this in, you can hear there's a hum to it. So I'm actually going to turn that hum off. And there's also that top end noise, which you can turn off with this tone noise right here. So this is a free Max for Live device. I think it's really, really cool. It does all of the aging, flutter, wow kind of things you associated with like an old cassette. So I'm just going to keep this in its default setting aside from the noise that I turned down, and let's just take a listen to see how it sounds with just the default on. You can hear this as a really, really kind of aggressive, downgrading kind of emulation. And of course, we can tweak this any which way we want. Like I might turn the amount of the dropouts down a little bit, maybe the depth of the wow. So the wow, just to show you what this does, let's go ahead and add another one of these. But I'm going to turn the amount of everything on it down, except for the wow. But I turn the depth of the wow up. You're going to start to hear the pitch kind of warble around a bit. That's what wow is. And flutter is similar, but at a higher speed. Kind of feels like an LFO, turning the pitch up and down a little bit, right? So that's flutter and wow. And all they're doing is emulating the motor on a tape cassette, turning at a less than consistent speed, which is then introducing pitch shifts to the sound. Because if a tape moves more slowly or more quickly, it'll be either pitched up higher or lower depending on that. All right, this is also adding some nice low-end noise. I'm going to turn that down a bit. Let's just turn the depth of the wow and the flutter down. I'm going to crank the tape age to see what that sounds like. It adds a really nice murkiness to it. I love that. So drive is going to add a little bit of a tape distortion, like you're driving it too hard, the cassette. And the motor time, I'm going to turn that down. That way it doesn't misalign the timing. This can sometimes have the effect of causing the sound you're applying this to be out of time. There's also a width knob. Turning the width down a little bit will make something feel a little bit old and a little bit degraded. So this is a really great start, and I'm loving how this sounds, but I do want to show you some ways you can do this using just Ableton devices in case you don't have Crap Cassette or can't find it. The first device I usually reach for is Echo. You can use Echo sort of as like a tape flutter and wow sort of emulator. So first of all, what we want to do is we want to turn the time to millisecond mode and set it down to 1 millisecond for each side, and then turn the feedback all the way down, and then turn the dry wet up to 100%. So what this is really doing right now is basically nothing. It's just delaying it by 1 millisecond, which is almost unnoticeable. Not really having much of an effect, but if you start to apply some modulation to the timing of this delay, we start to get some pitch shifting happening. And let's put these both in phase, actually. I'm going to set this to 0, so that way we don't get that spreading effect that's happening. And then I'm going to pull down the amount of modulation, so we're just getting a little bit of pitch shifting. And all I did was just desync this and set the frequency to something slightly lower than the default, 1.21 hertz. That's doing a great job creating that wow sound. Let's go ahead and duplicate this again and use a frequency that's a little higher to create the flutter, with a little bit less of the modulation amount. Gives it that sort of shuddery kind of like ugh feel, you know? There's also a hidden distortion in here. If we click on this little D button down here and turn the input up into it, we're going to start to drive it into this echo. Let's just take the output down to compensate for the added gain. Yeah, now we got like a nice kind of wobble. So this one is the wow. This one is flutter. Before, after. Already starting to sound nice and degraded. Now let's go ahead and get an erosion. Erosion is usually used to add some noise, but it also can be really nice on the sine mode. That's sort of like a downsampled feel, like a weird tone in there. I'm going to add a little bit of that, and then also just a little bit of the noise as well. I'll turn the width way up. And just add a touch of this in. Another Ableton plugin I really love for this is vinyl distortion. So this has a really, really nice kind of gritty effect to it if you start playing around with where the location of the distortion amount is. But something that's really great for is also adding in some crackle. So that really should be used pretty sparingly, but that's going to emulate kind of like an old record crackle, which just seems to be in every one of these tracks pretty much. I don't typically like to do this with vinyl distortion, however, I like to add this in as a sample, which we'll do later when we get to the effects. I'd say the final touch on this is to grab an EQ. I don't really need this vinyl distortion, given that I'm already doing a little drive here. I'm not going to use the crackle, but it's a great option if you'd like to use it. Last thing I'm going to do is use either an EQ8 or an EQ3 and cut the lows and the highs. Sometimes it's nice to boost the mids up quite a bit as well. That can make it sound very old and very degraded, as the lows and the highs will typically fall away and it'll get very mid-range heavy and a little ringy with degraded tape. But there's a preset on EQ3 that I like for this called Midnight. I typically will just slap this on it and just adjust the frequency high and low. Maybe a little combination of the two can be nice. So we went from just a nice clean piano to something that sounds really dusty. Alright, so enough for the chords and the melodic stuff for now. Let's move on to the drums. Now, typically when you're making a lo-fi hip hop beat, you're going to look for a softer and thumpier kick. A pretty relatively non-aggressive snare, something that's nice and tight, not too bright, not too in your face, not too huge. And then all of the hats are going to be swung, and usually I pull them back in time a little bit as well. Let's start with the kick. Now I want to find something that's nice and thumpy. For this, I'm actually going to go into the EDMProd sample packs. And these are all free, by the way, on EDMProd's website. A link to that is in the description below. But let's just see what we've got in terms of the kicks. I think I like this mighty kick. So I'll use that and take a look into the snares. So here's a really nice dark. This first one's great. Boppy, a little boom bop type style. I'm going to put that on the 2 and the 4. That's going to start to hold the beat down for us. Let's just loop this first section. I'm going to start by making the beat kind of straight, and then I might play around with the placement of these drums a little bit just to make them feel more realistic. Alright, this is sounding pretty good so far. But I want this to feel a little bit lazy, so I'm going to move the snares back in time just a touch. A couple different ways you can do this. My preferred way is to go up to View, down to Arrangement Track Controls, and Track Options. That's going to now show a track delay over on the right hand side here. Now I can add 20 milliseconds of track delay to the snare, put them behind the beat a little bit. And then I might actually just go in and by hand shift the second kick back just a bit in time. And maybe a little too much. Really, I only moved it back approximately 30 milliseconds. Let's just go a little less than that. I want a lot of them to be on the grid. I want it to be pretty close, but just slightly off. The kick is definitely the backbone of the track. The kick and the snare are really the backbone of the track. So while it's nice to shift them around a little bit, you don't want to go too crazy with it. Otherwise, you're going to kind of reduce the effectiveness of what their role is here. And that's just to kind of lock the time down in the track. But a little bit is nice. And notice I'm keeping like the one that's on the 1 of each start to the phrase. I'm keeping that on the grid. Like I said, a little consistency is not going to hurt. Same way as moving these around is not going to hurt. And I'm actually kind of might want to try and add some little accent kicks in here too. Like a swung accent kick, maybe one that's here. Maybe even more swung. Cool, that's great. Now obviously it's just too big, too thumpy. Let's go ahead and turn this down. Maybe fade the front edge and make it shorter. And then just turn the volume of the whole channel down. Nice. Now we're getting that nice, like, you know, swingy kind of groove in there with this little accent kick. Yeah, that's pretty good. Group these up, call them kicks. Make them the same color. Call this one the accent. And this one, main kick. I do think this main kick might be a little loud. Maybe both are. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn the channel down just a touch. Same with the snare. Turn that down a little bit too. Now let's go ahead and find some hats. I really like this flash hat. I think it's pretty subdued. That's kind of what I'm going for here. So let's just go ahead and grab flash hat. And I'm going to, once again, lay a nice basic beat down to begin with. Probably just going to do 1/8 notes to start with. And then I'll spice it up a little past that point, as well as add some delay to it. I'm going to put this on a 20 millisecond delay as well. And I want this to be swung just like the top kick here. So I'm going to go ahead and move every other one back a touch so that they kind of match up with the kick a little bit and we get more of a locked in feel for the entire drum kit. That's very important when you're writing this genre, is you want the whole kit to feel like it's being played live by a person, just like we moved those piano notes around. Get everything all locked in like that. Now you can of course go in and use a groove to do this. I personally just like doing it by hand because I find it ends up being a little more human, and sure, it takes more time, but you know, good things take a little time. Let's just see what that sounds like. Yeah, maybe at the end we'll just put like a little extra one like this. And I'm just using my ear to figure out where I want this to go. I'm not doing this by any basis. You notice every time I move this around, what I'm actually doing is holding down command and dragging, which is going to turn the grid off underneath. I'm going purely based on instinct for this, not going based on any kind of like, oh, this is a quarter note, so you know, move it back a little bit. Just using my ear and feeling where it fits the groove. I might add that little one in a few other places too. Kind of feels good to put it where the accent kick is. I'm going to group all of these together, call these drums. And there we go. Now we have our drum kit. Now, again, I want to make this drum kit feel a little bit degraded and dusty as well. It already has that sound to it because we're using LoFi Hip Hop sample pack sounds, but let's just see what happens if we put like a vinyl distortion on it. So we've added in a little bit of like interesting stereo width to that kick. I think that sounds really good. We can add a lot of nice distortion right here with the tracing model section. Take a harmonic distortion on the input of it. Just a little bit is good. And I might just turn down the drive amount. Just I want like a little bit going on here. That's really nice. Yeah, I love that. So something else I think might sound pretty good on this is actually in the Super Knobs pack that EDMProd has released. If you go to the effect racks, there's a tape one in here somewhere. Here we go. These Tape World and Tape Hiss. Let's give these a shot. So that adds just like a really nice layer of noise emulating a cassette tape. And this sort of makes it feel like it's being played back through a cassette tape. So both of these I'm going to add to it. Before everything's a little bright in your face, here they're a little more chilled out. Yeah, this is great. Everything's starting to sound really, really nice and connected. Last thing I think we need to add here to this section would be a bass sound. So here you probably want to use a bass that sounds somewhat realistic, I'd say. And with the bass, you can be fairly melodic, but you know, always consider this has to play a secondary role to any melodic sound we might add in here. Found this nice guitar bass preset for Operator. Kind of a fat, warm sounding bass. I'm going to go ahead and use this, and I'm just going to play around with some notes here and try and come up with a cool bass line. Alright, I come up with this really pretty simple little bass line here. Let's just take a listen to it. You know, I think this actually needs to be scooted back in time a little bit. Feels like it's kind of just a little square and on the grid. If you notice, a few of these I've moved off the grid, just in keeping with our making it feel nice and swung, and very human. Yeah, that's nice. This can probably be scooted back a little bit as well. And I'm also going to add a little bit of delay to this, maybe just 20 milliseconds again over here. So even the ones that are on the grid are going to be slightly delayed. And these ones that I'm scooting back in time are going to be even more delayed. Now we don't want to go overboard, of course. And I think of these I can kind of drag out a bit. Oh, yeah, that's really nice. That sounds good. This one too. Pull it back in time. Everything's just kind of pulled and stretched, you know? If you want, you know, you can add a little flourish on to the end of this. Something simple, you know, just to kind of say, all right, this is the end of the phrase, moving on to the next one. Let's take everything that we have, duplicate it over, and I'm going to try and find some lead sound to put on top of this for the second half of it. We have our bass, chords. I don't really know even what to call these. They're nice. Maybe just pull them back a little bit. Definitely want to use these in the intro, so I'm going to copy these over, put these here. We'll make this our intro. I probably want to put these chords here as well, like perhaps just the last half of them here. No, we're going to have to make the intro twice as long, like that. Yeah, that's not bad. That's pretty nice. Very chill. We'll make this a little more interesting soon. And we'll just go ahead and add like a little bit of the hat in here. Maybe just take out the extras. Yeah, we can do something like that. Just to, you know, make the intro section more simplistic than the main section here. Perfect. Now let's just go and find some melodic sound. I think I might just try and find some like solo guitar or something. Found this cymatic sample that's pretty sick. It's an E minor though. I just transposed it down 2 semitones. Now it's in D minor. You know, that's the exact kind of vibe I was going for, but I think I might actually come over here and copy the effects I have onto it just to make it feel a little bit more gritty. And I want to cut some more of the highs out of this version. And more of the lows, just really focusing around this 1K area. Yeah, there we go. That's sounding pretty cool. Let's go and pay attention to the intro a little bit here, and then we'll call it a wrap. So, one thing we're missing for sure is definitely some vinyl crackle, right? I mentioned this earlier. Got a ton of these vinyl crackle samples in here. Any of these will work really well. I'll pull in this cashmere vinyl crackle sample. It's really nice. Now it's kind of up to you as to how aggressive you want to be with this. For me, you know, I might just like cut a little bit of the lows out of it. But not until it gets a little ways into it. I actually like that low end right at the beginning. I think it kind of feels much more natural. But we'll go ahead and do like that. So that way it's not running all the way throughout. And I'm also going to cut some of the high end. Again, same deal. I'll save that for a little ways into it. Just so it starts really nice and full, and then maybe over a little bit more time like that, it fades in. with the EQs, and it gets a little bit less prominent. We can also turn it down a touch too. Maybe just for some variation, I'll take the second half and lower it an octave. And yeah, it might be kind of nice too if we kind of just slowly fade this piano out over time, like that. So it gets darker and darker as it goes, and then it opens back up again right when the drop hits. Well, the main section, what do you want to call this? Yeah, I think this vinyl crackle is still a little bit loud throughout, so we'll turn it down. And I think I'm also going to automate the volume of the EQ down over time. That way, as the piano fades away, the vinyl crackle also fades a bit. Another way to make this feel a little bit more interesting at the beginning is something I often hear. So I'll often hear some kind of vocal sample be placed in the beginning, like someone talking. I've got a ton in my sample library that I just downloaded from random places, but you can go on YouTube. You can find these from anywhere you want. I'm just going to try and find one that sounds interesting and like it might fit the vibe. All right, so I haven't found a vocal sample yet, but I did find this really cool like tape spool spinning back sound. I feel like it really fits the whole like tape aesthetic vibe we're going for here. I'll throw that in there as a really neat little interesting effect and keep looking for some vocals. I found this pretty cool sample here of like some oral history with an old lady. I don't know, it sounded interesting, so figured I'd give it a shot. Let me just fade it in and cut it so it fits. It already sounds really old and like it was recorded a long time ago, which it probably was based on the sound of the recording.
And there was like a meal.
Got a lot of interesting noise to it. So I might add just like some gentle effect or something. Let me go back into the EDMProd super knobs. Yeah, let me check out the super knobs again and see if I can find something that would add some really interesting sound, like maybe a little analog stereo to it.
Stuff on the head.
And maybe I want to go ahead and I'm going to check out the extensions pack here and see if there's something cool in this.
Stuff on the head.
There's a little bit of downsampled type sound. An old radio type effect. That's pretty cool. This dusky stutter is really lovely. Just add some reverb and glitchiness to it, as well as adding a little bit of that vinyl crackle. So we already have vinyl crackle, so I'm just going to automate it down after the effect is over. But while it's in, it's not too bad to have. Let's just take a listen to how this all sounds now. there we go. I think that's sounding pretty good at this point. From here on out, I'd basically just keep duplicating what I've got and creating variations and just honestly letting it ride for a little while too, because this is all about just kicking back, being chill, making chill music. So hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. Go forth and make some lo-fi hip hop.